My name is Brent. Now, I could sit up here and talk about India for probably the next half an hour. However, Mr. Mayar is not paying me money to be able to do that today. But it is my honor and privilege today to roll out our India 20-year market forecast. Now, the India market forecast is a carve-out of our global market forecast. This is a forecast that Airbus does every year. And besides last year, there was a little hiccup and speed bump, obviously, because of COVID. But we do this every year. We look at every country's economy, its population, its demographics, how they're developing. We look at fuel prices. We look at sustainable energy, as well as, and last and certainly not least, airline network development. We bake this all together, and we come out with an air traffic forecast and a fleet evolution forecast based on aircraft above 100 seats in size. Now today, we're going to get to those numbers shortly. As Mr. Mayar so eloquently put, the story of India really is one of growth. At the end of last decade, it became the world leader in aviation growth. Going forward, for the next 20 years, India is going to be number one, the world leader in aviation growth in the world, which is very, very important. So today, I'm going to give you a little bit of color on the India's historic growth. We're going to look at, as Mr. Mayar said, the long-haul market, which we believe is a big untapped market here in India for Indian carriers. And last and certainly not least, I'll give you our vision on where the market is going in India according to Airbus for the next 20 years. And at the end, we're going to switch over to Alberto to talk about the A350 that's parked outside, and then we'll be able to take your questions and answers at that time. So this gives you a little bit of where India has come from since 2010. So 2010, India was the 9th largest market in the world, 9th largest air market in the world. That's a combination of both domestic and international traffic. And by the end of the decade, it had grown to the 5th largest air traffic market in the world. As Mr. Mayar said earlier, there was number 3 as far as domestic, only trailing a very mature market in the United States and China for that. Over that time, it has completely grown, about 10.3% average compound growth per year, and passed China as the world leader in growth in 2017. So an amazing run for India aviation overall. Once again, from 9 and 10, all the way to number 5 for domestic and international, becoming the 3rd largest domestic market in the world, leading the world in growth by 2019. And we expect that to continue, obviously, for the next 20 years. So that growth is tied to 2 components, a domestic component and an international component. As you can see here, in 2002, actually the international component was about 2/3 of the market in India, with the domestic being very small vis-a-vis. Now you can see how that has changed over time. International has continued to grow. Versus 2002, that has grown almost 5 times. The domestic, however, versus 2002 has grown about 15 times, which is amazing. However, that growth has been really on the backs of the increase in the proliferation of low-cost carriers and low-cost carrier fleets in India that has allowed this growing middle class to be able to travel domestically for a price that's very fair to them. So amount of massive growth, obviously domestic, huge, international has grown, but we believe that that really is the untapped market for India going forward. Moving on to the long-haul opportunity that Mr. Mayar spoke about earlier. So in 2010, there was 136 billion revenue passenger miles flown to and from India. Now, revenue passenger kilometers, excuse me, and obviously with my accent, I'd say miles sometimes, but passenger kilometers, if I'm an airline and I'm flying from point A to point B, a revenue passenger kilometer, if this 2 airports are point A and point B, and are 1 kilometer, if someone pays me to fly on that plane, that is 1 passenger kilometer mile. So that is what we're talking about here. So in 2010, 136 billion. That has grown to almost 236 billion revenue passenger kilometers in the last 10 years from 2010 to 2019. As you can see on the middle chart, the Indian carriers didn't do bad. If you just look at that in isolation, 6% growth for Indian carriers. However, as Mr. Mayar has also alluded to, 94% of that international growth went to international carriers. 94%. On a massive market like India, that really to us says there is an opportunity for Indian carriers to rebalance the market share in the international market going forward. And this is where we believe Indian carriers should be focused on for the next 20 years. That 6% growth has translated into only 14% of the market for long-haul travel out of India. 14% for Indian carriers. Once again, international carriers at 86%. Those are huge numbers. Now, as India continues to grow, we obviously think those dynamics are going to change. However, why do we say that? Well, let's compare this to two large markets, which India should rightly compare itself to as it continues to grow economically. So the first one, as you see, the 14% we detailed on the previous slide. China, which obviously is in the same neighborhood with regard to population size, maybe a few years ahead in economic development, but for long haul out of China, passengers travel on Chinese carriers 43% of the time. They get 43% of their market to and from China are on Chinese carriers. When you look at the number of wide bodies in operation in India in 2019, that 14% was tied to 57 wide bodies. Look at the number in China, 500, almost 500 wide bodies creeping towards that. 43% of the traffic stays on Chinese carriers on those almost 460 wide bodies in operation in China. If you look at the US, a very competitive kind of open skies market for the whole world, Delta, American, and United take about almost 40% of the traffic in their long haul market. They have almost 700 wide bodies in operation in the United States. Now, the United States is a very mature, large air market, and we believe India is going to be catching up with China and the United States in the next 20 years with regard to traffic. It's massive, as Mr. Mayara also alluded to. Population size, the economy continuing to grow. The middle class, and we'll get to that in a minute, continuing to grow, will drive traffic growth to be able to get the numbers closer to where they need to be to really grow the aviation market and the aviation ecosystem in India. This is also an interesting chart. We talked about in 2002, international traffic was about 2/3 in India. That was driven off of like 37 wide bodies. There was only 137 commercial aircraft in service in 2002 in India. So the wide bodies had about 37%. Fast forward to 2019 with that 57 number, that number is 10%. That has been stagnant for the last 20 years in India as far as the growth is concerned on the long-haul wide-body segment. As Remy also alluded to with regard to the single aisle, obviously low-cost carriers have increased significantly, driven by our good partners in the region, getting to almost 600 airplanes. 10% of that is wide bodies. We believe that needs to be changed, and we believe that Indian carriers can do it and rebalance the market share and take hold of this opportunity for international growth in the coming years. We talked about a little bit, you saw the growth for foreign carriers overall in India from 2010 to 2019. 94% of the growth went to foreign carriers. And if you look at the left-hand chart, that is why. 74% of international travel to and from India is currently connecting over a foreign hub. 74% over a foreign hub. Only 10% of the traffic is connecting in a domestic India hub. Now, okay, you say, well, how does that look like? Look at the right-hand side of the graph in China. 41%, only 41% is connecting on a foreign hub going to China. And then move to the right further, 35% is connecting on a foreign hub going to the United States. China and the US control a large part of that with nonstops and connect in their large domestic networks where they keep that money at home, so to speak. 74% was a number that obviously the Indian carriers need to work on, and we believe that that's something in the future they can do to shift share and have opportunities to continue to create the local aviation market by increasing connectivity and flow traffic in their hub. So, Mr. Mayar also touched upon the largest, most lucrative market from India is the US. Now, I asked the team, the team told me they wanted to put a really big American flag on there, and I said, no, that has to be smaller. So we settled on that one there. So as you can see, for the revenue share from India in the international market, it's 31% goes to the United States. About 55% of the revenue goes to the rest of the English-speaking world, when you can say the United Kingdom, Canada, as well as Australia, tied to India. As you can see there, how do people get to the United States out of India? Only 12% of that revenue is flown on Indian carriers, and today that's just predominantly Air India, obviously. Middle East, 40%. Europe, 25%, as you have to kind of fly that way anyway to go over, so Europe connects a lot of people too. We believe there is opportunity to readjust that revenue share back to Indian carriers to be able to tackle this, the largest, most lucrative market there is out of India going forward, which is the United States. And we'll talk about it a little bit later with Alberto, but the A350 is the perfect aircraft, we think, to capture that all-important revenue. So we alluded to this also. India has key pillars and drivers that are going to lead its world growth. It's going to be the most populous country by 2027, which is amazing. The urbanization is going to continue in India, so people moving from the countries into the cities to work and find jobs. 120 million by the middle of the next decade. Now, I just moved to India recently, and I lived in France for the 4 previous years. France, its population is 60 million people. So the people moving from the countryside into the urban areas in India is going to equal the population of France. For me, those numbers are just staggering. India is also going to go from a low to a middle income country. That is going to translate into people having more money to be able to do disposable things like travel and visit parts of the country they haven't been able to see. As I understand it, most people take the trains in India. If we can just start getting a fraction of that to fly back on airplanes, the numbers will just become massive. And the Indian government has laid out a very ambitious program for economic growth in the country and said we'd like to have a 5 trillion economy by 2027. Just to give you an idea of how aviation plays a factor in the rest of the world, aviation is about 10% of world GDP annually. So we are a big part of driving economic growth and improving living standards across the board. This gives us a little bit of color. Mr. Meyer also talked about the 0.12 propensity to travel. So India is part of, for our forecast reasons, part of Asia Pacific. That's the far western side, but Asia Pacific reaches to Japan all the way down to Australia. So the propensity to travel is like 0.39 for the region. India is at 0.12. Down the graph a little bit, significantly from China and also from Indonesia, which is interesting. And just to give you an idea, the bigger bubble, the light blue on the right, is the United States, which kind of leads the world, I guess, in size as well as travel per capita, which is about 2 trips per year for the average family. We see significant upside potential overall for Indians to be able to travel in the future going forward. So getting on to the forecast from Airbus. So the India market forecast that we are looking out the front window and seeing for the next 20 years, India is going to be the world leader in traffic growth in the world, 6.2% over the next 20 years. That's 6.2. How does that relate? The world average is only going to be 3.9% over that time. 6.2, world leader, world average, 3.9. Now, obviously, this changed a little bit. You saw the numbers at the end of 2019 were over 10%. Listen, we've all taken a big haircut because of COVID over the last X number of years. However, we expect that rebounds going forward, and that's a nice rebound from where we were as an industry and a world as far as aviation travel was concerned over the last few years. So 6.2 over 20 years, leading the world in growth. Very, very impressive numbers for India. How does that break down? This shows you where we believe that 6.2% is going. First and foremost, obviously, the domestic market has been the beast for India going over the last 15 years. That's going to continue to be number one. 6.7% growth per year in domestic traffic for the Indian marketplace. International also creeping up there. That's a 5.5%. As you see, those numbers are a little bit closer than they were before. 2019, India grew at over 10%. International was 6.3. Obviously, those have come down, and we are looking at 6.7 domestically and 5.5 internationally. So close. There's opportunity here, as we've said, to rebalance market share and to also grow this marketplace in the long-haul segment, in the international segment overall. 2,210 aircraft for replacement, and now that's going to be broken down into two categories. Are going to be, these are domestic small operation airplanes. That's the majority for growth and replacement, and we'll say that is conservative based off of, on the larger side, in what we consider the medium international and long haul operations. We showed the number 57 wide bodies in operation in India in 2019. We believe there's a significant amount of growth opportunity, obviously, in India that we've shown here today. We have a collection of aircraft that are all common in the cockpit, which means that it's easy to transition between the A321XLR, 330, and the A350, which you will see out here today. For the Indian marketplace, the A321XLR is an easy step up for operators that already have large A320 fleets today. They can test kind of longer haul operations with the A321XLR because the operating costs are significantly lower than a wide body. As they step up, it's an easy maneuver up into the A330 to take on regional type flying, within Asia as well as Europe, and to go long haul to the largest, most lucrative air market for India in the world, the United States. We believe the A350 is the machine to be able to do that. So as a collection in the medium and L category, 440 replacement and growth airplanes we believe will help drive India's aviation industry into the future in a very positive manner for the country overall. In addition to that, obviously to support those 2,200 plus airplanes that will be coming into the marketplace, there is a training forecast that is tagged into this also. For India, we believe we're going to need 34,000 new pilots in this marketplace to be able to grow this aviation industry. In addition, to work on those airplanes, to maintain them and keep them in the air, we're going to need 45,000 new technicians. So that is a lot of very well-paying jobs that are coming to support the growth in the industry. So thank you for your attention. It's an exciting time to be in India. It's an exciting time for the industry here. We are very bullish, obviously, on this marketplace, and we look forward to showing off our fabulous A350 that's parked outside to you guys this afternoon. And with that, I will turn it over to Alberto, who will tell you all about the A350 and its spot in the marketplace. Thank you.